both the worlds, if at all you can segregate world into two, the material world and the world of giving. Ideally, there should be one world. And he's somebody who's done his education from the most prestigious institution in the country. But today we are talking to him as an author. So let me welcome Mr. Gauranga Das, who's the author of The Art of Focus today. And we'll be talking about the art of focus today. What is the art of focus? Why is focus needed? What is the difference between focus and mindfulness? Why did he write this book? He, of course, is very active in the ISKCON community, which we know is doing tremendous impact in the social arena for many, many decades. So joining him in the conversation along with me will be two of my editorial colleagues, Ms. Vasudha Mukherjee and also Mr. Ruhail Amin. So let me start by asking Mr. Das, how have been the last 27 months for you, personally and professionally?
Thank you, Dr. Annurag Batra for welcoming me, and it's an honor and privilege to be here engaged with you. Well, actually, in the last 2 years, I've learned some few lessons from the COVID, which I want to share with you and the viewers. First is humility, because life is unpredictable, and a virus which is less than 1 gram in weight globally has brought the whole world to a halt. So second is I also realized that we have to coexist with nature. So let us take care of nature, because in spite of all the technology at our disposal, when nature unleashed this fury upon us, we could not do anything. Third, frugal living is beautiful is something which I learned, because we were forced to live with few things. Necessities of life were what we focused upon. And then we realized in these 2 years that many of the things which we had only clutters our life. Fourth, I also realized that nothing in life is indispensable. People during lockdown had to change their habits because many things were not available. And like, for example, I was a very, regular traveler across the world. And then in the 2 years, I never imagined I would stay at one place for such long periods of time. So flexibility is a great virtue. Fifth is, I realized that amongst all the assets which people have during COVID, and especially during the second lockdown in India last year, April, May, we realized how dear survival is. And when people were losing their loved ones, it was such a sight to see the heartbreak. And we realized how important it is for us to take care of our health. And even many doctors reported that given the same conditions, those who had not led the proper balanced lifestyle, they were affected the most. Sixth is that lockdown also demonstrated that freedom is one of our greatest privileges. So freedom is happiness. Let's preserve our freedom. Then sixth point, which I would like to reiterate, is I've been meditating on how, as Bhagavad Gita explains about karma. And we realized during the pandemic that certain people and businesses had a very heavy impact. Conversely, in the same period, several others, they flourished like anything. And therefore, success and failure depends on a lot of extraneous factors. Ego has no place, and we have to be always in the dependent mindset. And of course, I would also like to emphasize how digital adoption became such a norm. And I really wonder why we didn't take it up sooner. And ultimately, the best takeaway for me was that people experienced what it is to be than to always be in the state of doing. Humans became human beings, and family members came close to each other. Living rooms started to be used for living, and being became more important than just doing. So, I mean, these are some of the takeaways for me over the last 2 years. And honestly, Anurag, I think the very fact that we are here having conversation about my book, Art of Focus, was possible because there was a lockdown and my travel was arrested. And, I thought, let's make use of the best time, and art of resilience, art of focus now, and next year we'll come up with the art of habits.
Yeah, thank you, Gauranga ji. I have to say that, I've been planning to write books for the last 10 years. I've written summaries, but I've not, and I thought in the COVID period I would write a book. But having the responsibility and the joyful responsibility of being responsible for Businessworld in exchange for media kept me busy. And I can say that the last 2 years have been transformational for us in a positive sense.
Yes.
So I agree with all your observations. And I would say the most important is the first one, humility. Because if you're humble, then a lot of other things that you mentioned happen. Because then you allow them to happen. You have the humility and no ego to be able to say, I know everything, or this is how we will do. And just to build on what you said, Mr. Das, I say that the three things that we learned is, one, we know that we don't even know what we don't know. We know a lot. We know what we don't know. But during COVID, we learned that we don't even know what we don't know.
Absolutely.
Second is never say never. कि ऐसा नहीं हो सकता. This is not possible. I cannot be without my phone forever. I cannot live without going somewhere, traveling, eating out, whatever. Right? Everything is possible. And third is the why. Why am I spending time with Mr. Gauranga? Why am I on this podcast? The why is very important. हम क्यों कुछ कर रहे हैं? So I think it gave us time to introspect. Of course, you talked about mental well-being. You talked about, physically doing practices which keep you healthy and the environment sustainable. But now why this book, The Art of Focus? Why you believe it is needed? And how is focus different from being mindful?
Thank you, Annurag. It's a very, very pertinent question, because I have been observing over the last 10 years, especially when the digital revolution has increased, that overall, the cost which we have to pay as a society for distraction, just, since you are in the business world, if, an employee is interrupted by an email, it takes almost 1/3 longer to complete a task. And actually, almost 12% of the workers show signs of email addiction. And it has been seen that on an average, workers are productive only for 3 hours. And the problem is more amongst the millennials. 36% of
you're talking to me, and I'm a big email person. Okay, I send out lots of email, and I'm thinking about myself when you're talking to me. One good thing is I'm fully in the moment. I'm listening to everyone. But I have email. Only thing is when I'm in meetings and all, I don't look at emails throughout the day. I send it in the morning, I send it in the night, and I don't check mails after 8 p.m. So, in that sense, I've improved. But I'm thinking about what you're saying, because I am a bit like what you're saying.
Absolutely. No, I agree totally that we have to have chunks of focused time, and that really helps in productivity. And almost 86% of people interviewed in various levels on organizations, they said that Facebook and social media became a distraction. And it takes almost 23 minutes for people to refocus once they get distracted by different things. And I quote in my lectures in organizations that a country like United Nations loses almost $400 billion every year due to distraction. Companies in UK lose almost $60 billion, and in India almost $32 billion.
I never thought about it like this.
Yeah. So actually, forget that, because I grew up in Bhilai in a steel plant, and I've also seen accidents which have happened. And actually, if you see the statistics, almost 2 million people die every year due to work-related injuries and diseases, just because they lose focus at a certain point, and it can be fatal. And therefore, I thought that, it's very important for us for helping people refocus. Since February 2020, there has been a 300% increase in people searching on the Google for how to get your brain to focus. There has been more than 110% increase on how to focus better, and a 60% increase on how to increase focus. So, this is a very, very important element. And as parents, I see one of the greatest anxieties parents have today is how to get their kids remain focused in some of the most basic disciplines, which is coming to them on a platter, but they may not be realizing that for a generation before theirs, it was so difficult to get such privileges. So that's my story.
Can I tell you one thing, Mr. Das? I have much more focus than I used to be. I have to say this, the focus is your book. the focus is the content in the book, the central message of focus that you are evangelizing, and the techniques and the benefits. But a lot of people ask me about, because I'm a very social person. So I met very few people in the lockdown. And, of course, in the last 3-4 months, again, things have come back to some semblance of normal. But the fact is, I was able to achieve more because I was very focused in the last 24 months.
Absolutely.
I mean, it happened by God's grace,
Fantastic.
the universe blessing. But and one of the things is I keep my phone away. I keep it the other way down so that I'm not looking at anything from social media. I try and do meetings, and again, the quality of sleep also determines the focus. I think in my case, the focus comes from quality of sleep, and I must say that one of the reasons we have, and I have done personally well in the last 2 years, is because of my focus. So I fully endorse what you're saying.
Thank you.
And so I think your book is needed more than ever, because focus can help in work, it can help in relationships, it can help in, I have to say that I saw this post by a friend of mine who's in Canada. He used to be CEO of a very large company, and I didn't meet him on this trip. But he posted that I was in India, I met friends. But everyone is having conversation, but they're in a hurry.
Absolutely.
They are in a hurry. So maybe you have to cut down the number of things. I'm telling that to myself. Cut down the number of things I do, but do it then with more deeper focus. Now, coming to how does one differentiate between focus and mindfulness?
Actually, if you look at the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna refers to this when Arjuna asks him a question about the mind, and Arjuna says to Krishna, the nature of the mind is chanchalam, it is very fickle, pramathi, it is very obstinate, balavat, it is very strong, dridham, and it is totally, bent on doing something. So Vayur even Sudushkaram, it is more difficult to control the mind than controlling the wind. So when Krishna hears this, he says, Asamshayam Mahabaho Mano Durnigraham Chalam. Yes, Arjuna, I understand. Mind is difficult to control. But by two things, you can bring this mind under control. Abhyasena tu kaunteya, vairagyena chagrahiyate. Through the process of practice and through the process of vairagya or detachment. So practice and detachment is the process of mindfulness, and it is the process. And when you practice this process of mindfulness or meditation, then the final accomplishment is what is known as focus. So mindfulness is the practice, and focus is the final attainment or the result. So that's the idea of what yoga is. Yoga chitta vritti nirodha, says Patanjali, that the fluctuations of the wave-like mind and the desires need to be arrested, and the process helps you ultimately come to the stage of Krishna gives the example in the Bhagavad Gita of a lamp in a windless place. Yatha deepo nivatasto nengate sopama smrita. Deepa, just like a lamp in a windless place, remains still. So therefore, the idea of mindfulness is how to arrest and stop all the surrounding wind, and then we attain the focus, which is the lamp is glowing steadily.
Thank you so much. Now, there are many chapters in the book. Which is your most favorite chapter and why?
Well, I can think of chapter 21, which I speak of Guru Bhakti.
Yes.
In India, understanding of Guru is pretty common. Even now across the world, people are realizing this and they're talking about it. I get a lot of people from the West saying we are searching for a Guru. So this is the story of a boy who's spent almost 12 years at a hermitage. And it's not like a typical college, but the Guru wants the students to go under a tree, recite the important philosophical understanding and verses. And while speaking or reciting, if any mistake is there, then the leaves would fall. And the number of leaves which fall would indicate the number of mistakes which the student has made. And, the student just thinks of the deities he had prayed to, and all the leaves fall below. So then at that time, when he says that, how is it that by thinking of the deities, all the leaves fall? And the Guru says, actually, first you should offer respect to your Guru. And that's basically the idea, that in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, you approach the Guru in 3 ways. Number 1, submission. Second, service. And third, questions, inquiry. So tadvidhi pranipatena pariprashnena seva. So the word pranipata in Sanskrit is coming from an interesting compound, prakrishta rupena nipatati, which means, nipat means slate, perfectly blank slate. So when we approach someone in a perfectly blank slate kind of consciousness and expect them to then guide us, then the impact is maximum. So even in the business world, in the corporate world, in parenting, it's always a pleasure when you are able to mentor someone who's willing to learn, wanting to learn, and comes with the consciousness of a blank slate and has the expression of gratitude. Kritagya kono seveta duraradhyam asaduri. So gratitude and humility they are the 2 most important ingredients for someone to have the ability to absorb and learn.
Absolutely. I keep saying someone who has grace has everything. And gratitude and humility are grace. And you have a chapter 9, the power of time. And you talk about the human quality of gratitude. But since you took up the chapter 21, which is Guru Bhakti, where you talk of human quality of devotion, and devotion to a guru, to a certain consciousness. You also have a chapter called Never Give Up, which is chapter 20, which is the human quality of perseverance. Give us a sense of why is that a very important quality in any domain. And, how can one cultivate perseverance? Can you cultivate perseverance?
Yes. Actually, in this chapter, I narrate the tale of a family who was caught in a catastrophe. And, the father stretches beyond imagination and he perseveres to help his son in spite of the dangers which come at every moment. So I will begin this description of perseverance by quoting the famous verse of Bhagavad Gita, which practically most Indians and Hindus know. Karmanyavadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. Ma karma phela heturbhu matra sangot swakarmani. That we must actually, Krishna says, be focused on our action and duty. And we should avoid being tricked in the following 5 ways. First, complacency. Familiarity breeds contempt. So when we revisit a situation in life, we tell ourselves, I have seen it and done it, but it's an involuntary thought mechanism. It stems in the mind. So we should avoid complacency. Second, we should avoid isolation. People think that, I'm better off if I'm alone. I need my own space and independence. But actually, interdependence and collaboration may sometimes be better.
Third, you talk about in your first chapter, you talk about the need for human connection and the benefit of human connection.
Absolutely.
That is the center around which we evolve.
Absolutely. And so the third is about hopelessness, is that, Samuel never lost his hope. He showed great character, remained relentless to save his son. And every aspirant is confronted the gap between the real, where they are, and the ideal. And this gap can tend to become uncomfortable. Sometimes it creates guilt, because you feel guilty, I'm not reaching there. Sometimes it may create frustration. You think, oh, I am trying to learn, trying to be perfect, but I'm nowhere near there. So this is the third element. Fourth is diversion, because, sometimes one may think that we get diverted from the goal and focus towards the people. We focus towards situations, we focus towards places, and we are extremely busy just addressing the diversions and we don't address the real goal. And fifth, Anurag, I would say the most important of all is pride. Pride is straightforward, and people relate to it as an impediment. And therefore, just like snake and ladder, you'll go up, 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 up. But that big snake which is there on the last, square, and if you land there, you can come right to the bottom,
Back to where we started.
back to where we started. So that's it.
Yes, so, let me ask, very material world. It is a very, how do you create the balance? I don't think to renounce is fully possible, at least not for a person like me. At least that's what I think. Who knows the future? But how do you create the right balance? Is through the focus that you talk about in the book in various chapters. Is there a playbook to creating that right balance?
That I would say that the balance is a very, very important principle, because lack of balance is what topples us. Okay, so if you see, I share one story of the battle of insects, and it's very important because we live in an area of social media, metaverse, and internet and everything, and we always seek refuge externally. And therefore, in the 19th century, in the scenic city of Colorado, the Battle of Insects is a painful story how one can tend to be consumed internally. So Colorado has a lot of mountains, forests, canyons, rivers, etc. So a father and son take a walk, and then they trace the history of a century-old tree. And the father is praising the tree. Oh, the tree has the ability to, withstand avalanches and cyclones and hurricanes. But then that tree fell to boring insects, wood boring insects. And they go inside the tree and they actually structurally weaken it. And that is how our own behavior and nature of mind can consume us from within. And so it's very, very important for us to realize that if our education system is simply focused on externals, we forget that the word education comes from the Latin word educare, which means to bring out that which is within, to purify that which is within. So therefore, if you see, I say in my talks in various corporates that the three biggest mental health challenges we are facing today is the three cancers of the mind: comparing, complaining, and criticizing. When we are focused on others and not focused on ourselves, we keep
Comparing,
complaining, and
criticizing.
criticizing.
So true. So true.
So the three cancers of the mind. And so Krishna also refers to this in the Bhagavad Gita and tells Arjuna that balance yourself by overcoming these three. Trivida narakasyedam dwaram nashanam atmana kamam krodham tatha lobham tasmat etatrayam tejit. Krishna says that Arjuna focus on internal balance by conquering these three enemies: kamam, lust; krodham, anger; lobham, greed. If these three are conquered, and I know, Anurag, you have hundreds of more case studies than even I would know on how some of the greatest corporations have collapsed in spite of the best strategy, because the leadership at the top level were affected by one of these three. These are not just three words, but you can narrate so many case studies related to this.
Thank you so much. I'm thinking about myself when you're saying all these things, because at the end of the day, the one responsibility that you have is to change yourself, and the power to change yourself, and to be able to benefit from the wisdom of other experts who've written about it or have evangelized it. And your book is clearly meant to make us think and introspect and do some of the things that you're talking about in the book. Let me ask you my last question before I bring in Vasudha. Who is this book intended, and why should someone pick up this book? And what is the impact you're looking at when someone reads the book? Like, I'm having a conversation with you, I'm listening to you, I'm already thinking about my own focus. I'm already thinking, I do compare, I do complain. Though I must tell you, I've brought my complaining to 10% from 100. I can't say I've gone to 0. And criticize also, I brought it down to a huge, because I've done it consciously. I don't even talk ill of people that are not in the room. And it's very tough when you're in a business competitive environment. It's not easy. But I'm trying. I got a compliment from my EA of 12 years who's older than me, Durga, who's interacted, that I've become calmer. So because I sleep well, I think about, I do lesser things. So this book has been immensely useful for me. This conversation has been immensely useful for me. I'm sure it will be for others, this book. So who is this book intended for? And what is the impact you're looking to make on someone who reads the book?
Honestly, this book is intended for self-transformation for each and everyone. So today we are talking about corporate social responsibility, where 2% has to be given for social impact. But honestly, unless there is self-transformation, the intention for social impact does not happen. If the intention for social impact doesn't happen, there will not be any inspiration. So unless there is intention and inspiration to do something positive, one will not use the right intelligence. And then along with inspiration, intention, and intelligence, there has to be intensity. And when there is proper intensity along with intelligence and inspiration and intention, then there is a possibility of impact. So therefore, if you're looking for social impact, let us begin with self-transformation. I have written this book to enable each and every person, from kids to old people, all across ages, because self-transformation is a constant journey. It is not like a 4-year course where you are in a college and come out. So I would say that I've been fortunate to be dealing with people across all ages.
Thank you so much. And I would say, adding to the I's that you intent, intensity, inspiration, this is all the insights that you have for that transformation. So with this, let me bring in Vasudha to carry on the conversation and ask you the next set of questions. Vasudha, you and Mr. Gauranga Das.
Thank you so much, Dr. Batra. And, listening to this whole conversation has been so inspiring in itself, just kind of hearing about your own journey and about how you kind of put this book together. And actually, what I found really fascinating is how you chose all these different stories to kind of talk about focus and talk about all these different priorities people have. Can you tell me a little bit about why did you choose to kind of write it this way, and how did you choose the stories that you chose to put into this book?
That's a good question, Vasudha. What I realized was, especially the younger generation, they are so distracted and have such less attention span, that I specifically wanted to share messages with them based on stories, because stories really have a effect of a hook. It kind of helps you people connect with it. At the same time, they don't feel offended because it is indirect. So in Vedic literatures, this style is known as parokshavad. So parokshavad means you convey a message indirectly through other characters. But when we are seeing or reading it, we also find our reflection there. So therefore, it helps in creating the impact without making people offended. So that's the idea.
I mean, I do believe that, kind of hearing other people's experiences is a really great way to learn. And it also, because it's called the art of focus, it's a really great way to actually have people's also attention stay on the book. Is there any story in here that that you would have liked to add if you had the chance? Is there any story that you wish you could have kind of take out during the editing process?
Yeah, I mean, there are quite a few stories, but one story I could not insert in this book, but I really like it, is the story of a family who wanted to really have a trip on a ship, on a voyage, and they had made all the arrangements, and they were taking off from London, and when all the tickets and everything was booked, just a week before, one of the kids in the family was bitten by a dog, and the family was forced to get quarantined. The kid was quarantined. They were not allowed to travel, and the father and that means the husband and the wife, they went to the docks to see off the ship as it was going, and they were really cursing the dog that they ruined our entire vacation and our voyage. And then just 3-4 days later, they learned that that particular ship was the Titanic, which sank. And they kind of started glorifying the dog, thanking the dog, that thanks to him, thanks to the dog, they still have a story to say. So sometimes things happen in our life over which we have very little control. But it is described in the Srimad Bhagavatam that both pride in success and moroseness in defeat is useless. And the idea of all the Vedic literatures is to help us retain and gain and increase the most precious internal asset all of us have, which is hope. And that is the place where everybody gets connected. And these are the spiritual places like the temples and the synagogues and the mosques. And that's why religion and spirituality and philosophy is so attractive to people across the world, because all of us go through various episodes where it is so easy to become hopeless. And therefore, we need such stories. We need situations and characters with whom we can relate with to regain that hope.
Absolutely. And I did see that you added a lot of Gita verses into the book also, and it's obviously been a very, very big inspiration for you. But can you tell me a little bit about how did you choose which verse to add in and when did you feel like maybe it was getting too much and you had to kind of remove that?
Yeah, actually, I joined, way back in 1993 and began teaching the Gita. So over so many years of teaching experience, basically I've been giving sermons and lectures. So this is regular part of our style, that as per the relevant context, we give a particular verse and explain it accordingly. So, according to the different themes which the book was dealing with, whether it was humility, whether it was guru-disciple relationship, or whether it was mind control or overcoming the impurities within. So according to the context, the different verses from the Gita came in handy. And if you have read the Bhagavad Gita as it is by Srila Prabhupada, it has all the verses and the purports. And one of the interesting websites which I would request all the viewers to visit is vedabase.io. And in vedabase.io, practically all the books are there. And Prabhupada ji came to London. He was asked a question by a reporter, what brings you to London? Why have you come here? And he said that, well, over the last 300 years, British have looted so many things from India, but forgot to loot the most important jewel, the Bhagavad Gita. And I've come to give home delivery for that. So therefore, I think in the context of the Gita, all these stories can be explained very beautifully.
Yeah, no, some books and some stories are just timeless in that way. We do have a question from one of the audience members who is asking, because you mentioned before about how focus changes with new innovation and new technology. And of course, the phone has been a major invention when it comes to major disruptor in our focus and how we focus on things. But they were asking about Metaverse in particular. And how do you think, what are your views and how is Metaverse going to challenge our focus?
Well, I must say that any new technology externally, however different or quick it may be from the previous technology, can all be accommodated with consummate ease if we have sufficient control over our internal world. So therefore, I suggest for all of those who are watching this, that they must bring in 4 steps in their lives to create internal stability. First, I call it the ABCD. A for association. Associate with people who prioritize internal purification and transformation and self-transformation. B, study books which help you understand the purpose of life, which keep you grounded in an eternal identity beyond the temporary changing identities. C for contemplate. Spend quality time in contemplation, stillness, and understanding my real eternal identity, and preferably in the morning, because that's the best time to gain in that energy. And D for diet. You are what you eat. And in the Bhagavad Gita purport, Prabhupada ji says, Ahara Shuddha Satpa Shuddhi Satpa Shuddha Durasmriti Smriti Lamme Sarvagranthi Nami Pramoksha. So people underestimate the power of diet and how it can affect and impact the consciousness. So with these four things, association, books, contemplation, and diet, we can actually create a very stable internal transformation. And with that strong foundation within, I think any kind of external changing circumstance can be dealt with, whether it is metaverse or any other verse.
Thank you, and I hope that answers your question. And thank you so much for asking that. But talking about this, same thing about technology and stuff. We are kind of in this hustle culture, and we have so many people who are multitasking, and it's almost like glorified this kind of like working all the time and doing multiple things at a time. What would your advice or what would your message be to people who kind of believe in multitasking as a productive way of working?
Yeah, see, as far as the mind is concerned, Gita is very clear that the mind cannot focus on two things at the same time. Mind can focus only on one thing at a time. So when we speak about multitasking, during the time when we are doing a particular activity, we have to remain focused on that activity. So the only difference is the number of different activities one kind of person does in a 24 hours and another kind of person does. So depending on your profession and your character, your personality, there may be different kinds of people who may be switching the types of activity they are doing and the flavors of the activity they are doing over 8 to 10 or 12-hour period and day. Although they may be switching the activity, when they are engaged with that activity, they are fully invested in that activity during that period. But they may have been blessed with the ability to switch activities, multiple activities over 12-hour period. Whereas there may be others who may only focus on one particular activity for 8 to 10 hours. They may be writers, thinkers, or any other kind of businessmen or whatever. So the fact remains that you cannot accomplish anything of value unless you have the ability to focus deeply.
I think that's a really good message to take home. And I think the deep down, we all kind of know that, but it's very easy to kind of get caught up in the day-to-day grind. And again, like, in social media and what's happening around us and get caught up in the competition of it all and kind of forget about these things that actually bring you so much joy and peace. And I just want to ask you two more questions before we conclude today's discussion. First thing I want to ask you is that, focus, like you call the book Art of Focus, but of course the book is so much more than that. It's telling us it's not just about focusing, it's about lifestyle, and how we can kind of change our lifestyle, make it better, improve it, find peace in it. Can you tell me, like to you, what is in your own words, what is the connection between lifestyle and focus?
I think it's a very crucial question you have asked. It's the connection between the fuel and the vehicle. So if I'm riding a moped, so riding a moped, you will need one type of fuel. If I'm driving a tractor, it will need another type of fuel. If I'm trying to drive a Mercedes Benz, it requires another kind of fuel. And if I'm sitting in a jumbo jet and Boeing airplane and I want to take off, that needs another fuel. So according to the kind of vehicle and our destination, a different kind of fuel is required. So similarly, depending on the object of focus which you are aspiring for, a different type of lifestyle would be required. So one kind of lifestyle can help you attain a certain objective with that focus. Another lifestyle is required if through your focus you want to attain another objective. So therefore, depending on the kind of objective you have, a different kind of lifestyle would help you focus. Like if somebody aspires to be a gold medalist sports person, they'll need focus. But to achieve that objective, they will need one kind of lifestyle. Whereas if somebody aspires to be a yogi in the Himalayas, so they will also need focus. But for that objective, they will need another kind of lifestyle. So therefore, each objective has to be supported by a certain lifestyle. So that lifestyle is the fuel which helps you actually rise and reach that particular objective.
Well said. And my final question, which I actually like to ask all the authors that come on our platform, is since we are talking about books, is there anything you're reading right now, and can you share that with us?
I am currently reading Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the story of an emperor who was at the peak of his youth and was cursed to die in 7 days and 7 nights for a very small accidental freak accident, like insulting somebody, and his whole lifestyle was curtailed. And he comes to the realization that circumstances are not within our control, but my consciousness is within my control. And so he faces death by preparing for death. And for 7 days and 7 nights, he hears the eternal spiritual wisdom of the Bhagavad from Shukadeva Goswami, thus showing to the whole world that ultimately death is an event which can be planned for, which can be prepared for, and which can be counteracted and conquered over. Because all of us focus on educational planning, family planning, wealth and economic planning, assets planning, relationships planning. But all of us see death all around us, but many of us don't seem to be planning for it. So that's a very fascinating book. And if you go to vedabase.io, you will immediately see all the 12 cantos of the Srimad Bhagavad Puran.
Thank you so much. Thank you for taking out your time and coming and speaking with us today. I hope the audience also had a good time listening to you, and I really hope we can have you back on the platform when your next book come out. Anyone who wants to rewatch this can do so on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook. It'll be available there. And of course, you can find this book in your local bookstore or online as well, because we have them all available. Thank you so much, Mr. Dasky, for joining us today. I hope you have a great day ahead of you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Same to you, Sudhaji.